rush again. Fields to the end zone. Moore. Touchdown.
With time, throws it short. Foreman with the catch. Foreman to the end zone for the touchdown. Warriors' long pass of the day is 15 yards, and it's intercepted. Picked off by Jalen Johnson. Johnson, untouched for the touchdown.
What's up, Bears fans? Welcome in. We got a win. Can't believe it. So let's get this thing going tonight on a Friday night. My name's Jeff, as most of you guys know already from watching the show the last couple weeks. It's our third episode. Over here on the other side is my partner, Tim. Why don't you introduce yourself, Tim?
Yep, Tim Willis here, back on for our third edition of this episode of this show. Looking forward to Good Friday evening. Hey, and it's Victory Friday.
So I just want to start off the show today. I've been wanting to bring something up to you guys last couple weeks, something that we want to start doing here. I started a new email account for the show, and I'm going to start a Twitter account at some point too here in the next couple weeks. But I started an email account with the idea that we have a segment we want to start on the show called Willis's Wallops. And what that is we want you guys, the listeners, and we're going to do this ourselves as well. We want you guys to find some clips from the games around the week, from all over the league where big hits are happening, either on defense where guys are just laying out big hits, or on offense, big blocks are getting laid out. A good example would have been a couple weeks ago when Tevin Jenkins drove a guy 5 yards and pancaked him. That'd be a really good example of a Willis's wallop is what we're going to call it. So if you guys have ideas or you see clips of those things, even if it's not from this week, go ahead and send them over in a email to me on the screen there, Willis Twin Towers Podcast at gmail.com. Send the email over with some videos of that, and we'll post them on the screen for you guys to enjoy. And I think we'll have a lot of fun with that. Tim, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I would say there's going to be a lot of Tevin Jenkins if he continues like he's been doing. He's been just mauling guys over. Like, I love it. I love watching that. Yeah. Torian, how are you?
So, I want to say too, guys, it's good to see you all here. It's not very often we're going to have a Victory Friday on this show because how often you play on a Thursday, but it's been twice this year now. I've seen some people saying around Twitter, on YouTube and stuff, that maybe the Bears should just play on Thursdays because that's when they seem to win, And, I think there is some truth to the fact that the players do like to play on Thursdays a lot because there's not as much practice during the week, and it's just kind of like rock and roll right away. And then they get that extra 10 days to rest, so that, I feel like there is some truth that maybe teams come out and play a little bit harder. You could probably argue that Carolina might not be the case last night, but to be honest, they're just not very good.
Yeah. I was just going to say, whatever, something about Thursday nights, I guess. Well, even primetime in general, they tend to play better in primetime. I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe it's just because they know the cameras and spotlight are on them and they want to show off for the camera. I'm not really sure, but whatever. I don't care. We're winning football games, which that's right now. That's what we need to do more than anything is just focus on getting a few wins here and stringing together some wins, because I don't know about you, but I don't want the number 1 overall pick because that means we've got a problem. So, I mean, I'd like to have Carolina's maybe, but I don't want our pick to be that high because that means that we're struggling bad and we have a lot of holes to fill.
Yeah, we definitely still have some issues around, all over the roster. I mean, we have some pieces in place that I feel like they got to feel pretty good about going forward. They were having a conversation this morning. If you guys aren't regular listeners to Gabriel Talks Football on this channel on Barroom Network, it's a really, really, really good show. And Greg, this morning we were talking about, I asked a question on there and they brought it up about how they feel, how Greg thinks they feel about the bookend tackles that they have right now in Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright. And I specifically asked if he thinks they felt good enough about Jones that they wouldn't look to adding one of those guys at the top of the draft or Fasanu Joe Alt goes to Notre Dame. Fasanu goes to Penn State. If you guys aren't familiar, both are like big time tackle prospects, two of the better ones we've seen in a long time. And Greg was very flat in his response that, I mean, no, I don't think they would consider that, because I think that they found Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright as their guys. And I personally agree. And I just the reason I asked is because there's been some chatter out there about it. But, I think the reason that the most of the talk has been happening in the first place is because Jones was hurt for those 4 weeks when he was on IR. But in the games he's played, he has certainly shown a lot more in his ability to anchor the bull rush. I feel like he's improved significantly there. He's always been a pretty good run blocker, but the last couple of weeks, I felt like he's played really, really good football. And to me, I feel like he is a building block. Yeah, there's been some issues there. There's been a couple, pressures here and there, but it's like, for the most part, he's looked pretty good. What do you think about that, Tim?
I mean, I'm kind of on the fence with this. I don't really know where I lean here. So I would like Braxton to be the guy, because then that means you don't have to allocate resources towards a tackle. Now you have your bookend tackles. But I look at it too, like, you and I are both Notre Dame fans. We watch a lot of Notre Dame film, and Joe Alt is just he is so good. And it's run blocking, it's pass pro, like, he's just good in every facet. He's built exactly like what the Bears are looking for. He's long, he's a little bit lanky, athletic. Like, to me, he's exactly what Ryan Poles covets in a tackle. And when I look at that, I think, look at where we've been as far as offensive line depth goes over the last couple seasons. It's not been very good. Now, I will say that Larry Borum has been really good, actually. I shouldn't say really good, but he's been exactly what you need him to be in the absence of your starting left tackle. But
he's been replacement level.
He has. I mean, he's done exactly what they've asked him to do. I just think if you have the opportunity to bring in an elite guy, and now you can make Braxton your swing tackle, or, maybe work him in at guard as well. I mean, because now you have two bookends that you've taken in your first two first round picks over the last 2 years. And Braxton Jones automatically right off the bat becomes the best swing tackle in football. And, I would say that as good as he's been, maybe you don't want him to be a swing tackle. But at the same time, why would you not want the best case scenario there? He's a 5th round pick. You're not allocating a lot of money towards him. And now you're able to actually, that would be a really good, that would be a lot of depth on the offensive line. And you've got good guards. If you can get those guys to stay healthy, Tevin is the big question mark. Now you have your bookend tackles. You can also look to improve, because you still need another pass rusher, in my opinion. You still, even if Gervon Dexter's looked pretty good, but we are still not sold necessarily on our 3 technique. And then you still maybe even need another weapon. And, you'll have Marvin Harrison Jr. up there in that area if you do want to go that way. I know a lot of people don't necessarily agree with that. Like, why go wide receiver there? But when you have the opportunity to draft a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., who is a generational talent, you usually jump on that. You don't let those guys go to other teams, especially because you risk the chance of going to a division rival, and then they're killing you for the next 10, 15 years.
Real quick, can we get that last comment back up on the screen that you had on there, Aldo? Cliff makes a good comment here. Looking at the big picture, the Bears have 7 games to improve. Coaches have 7 games to judge talent and try things. And the reason that I'm even bringing that up right now in the first place is because it kind of goes in line with what we're talking about here. Braxton Jones is going to have 7 games to show whether or not he is a good enough left tackle to pass on those other guys. Number one, which in my personal opinion, I think he's already shown enough to where you don't need to really go that direction. But that's just my opinion, because he's got a year and a quarter of pretty damn good football under his belt. And the other point of that is the other side of the line in the trenches, you got guys like Dexter and Pickens, which Pickens' snap count was pretty low last night. That surprised me a little bit. But
I think he had 19 snaps. That's really
12,
low.
I think. 12, I think. And Dexter had a pretty decent snap count. And
29.
Justin Jones had a pretty high snap count too, and I think that was part of the reason why Pickens' snaps were lower and Billings, had a pretty decent snap count too.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I even said that in the first place is like guys like Dexter and Pickens, this is a chance to see if they can develop into those guys too, or whether or not you need to use a high pick on a 3 tag. And the way I look at it, Dexter is really, really, really starting to roll. I mean, he hasn't put up sacks yet. He's not showing a ton like popping, for people that are looking for stats and stuff, but he's getting pressures. He's pushing guys backwards and he's getting awfully close. There was a couple sacks last night that were a result of him getting
the first one, Justin Jones sack.
Inside. Yeah, that one was from him getting pressure inside, and he ran right into Justin Jones' arms. So to me, these are things where you got to see if it's good enough to where you really need to move on. I shouldn't say move on, but whether you need to see if you got an improvement to take at the top of the draft there. But like I said, there are some needs. You got light needs at defensive end still, even with Sweat. You need another edge rusher who can get it done. You still have a need at receiver, in my opinion. Whether or not you lock down Mooney or not is questionable. We don't know if that's going to happen or not. We don't know whether or not they're going to lock down Johnson or not. I'm sure he's going to get the tag if they don't. Mm-hmm. But still, you got needs. Safety is a need, and I'm not sure these guys are first-round needs, but I'm going to go back to what I've said before with you, and I fully expect them to do this because they've already done this in the past. When the draft comes around with 2 first-round picks in the top 5, they probably use one of those picks, their own pick there, whichever one, either theirs or Carolina's, they probably use that pick. But the other one, I promise you, they're going to move down. I would be absolutely shocked if they did not move down with one of those picks to try to, A, pick up a first rounder next year, and or B, a second rounder this year, which they do not have at this point.
Well, I think you're probably right, unless somebody's falling. Say Marvin Harris. Say they draft one of the left tackles, or they draft Newton or somebody with that first pick, and then Marvin Harrison maybe falls down to them at the second pick. I doubt they move down if they can, if he falls that far into the second, because I
would be
feel like
absolutely shocked if Marvin Harrison fell past.
He's not going to. But if you look at the past several years, nobody's gone in the top 5 as far as a receiver goes. I think the highest was Jamar Chase, and I want to say he was the 7th overall pick. I could be wrong about that. But nobody's gone to, was he 5? Then he was the highest, and we haven't seen anybody else go in the top 5. So, I mean, he's probably going to fall a few spots. But just assume
Julio went 5th several years ago, didn't he? If I'm not mistaken. I think Julio went 5th.
He went number 2 overall. They traded up to get him number 2 overall.
He went top 5 in either case, if that's true.
You're talking 10, 15 years ago.
But still, I mean, it happens. If a guy is good enough, it's going to – and you got to look – the way I look at Harrison is like he's one of those guys where he's got pretty much everything you want. He's got good enough speed to get down the field and burn guys. He's an exceptional route runner. Mm-hmm. He has all the size in the world. And look what his dad is. He's got the pedigree. His dad he knew how to play the game and knew everything it took to be a great football player. And if you don't think he's going to pass that stuff on to his kid, I mean, it happens left and right. Look at Joey Porter's son right now. Mm-hmm. He's a stud in Pittsburgh as a rookie right now. He's playing great football right now. Surtain, same thing. Pat Surtain's kid is
Christian
a stud.
McCaffrey.
Christian McCaffrey is his dad played. There's a lot of guys who's, it doesn't always happen this way, but usually if these guys are like big time talents and they're talked about as, potentially going at the top of the draft and their dad played in the league, they're probably going to pan out. For the most part, that has been the case.
Yeah. And I do think you're probably right. They probably would trade down unless somebody fell to them. But I want to ask you a quick question. When we were just talking about Dexter and the defensive line and how he's been coming on. So I feel like his playing time has improved a little bit each week, but I would really like to see him get even more playing time, more snaps, because let me ask you this. Do you feel like when Dexter is in there, you're losing anything from when Justin Jones is on the field? And this is I'm asking you this question. Do you feel like they're losing anything?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, here's my opinion on this whole thing right now. to be fair to Justin Jones, you and I have not been the biggest fans of his from the get-go. You know, he really hasn't shown me much in 2 years that I was really impressed with. I mean, but again, to be fair, the last couple weeks, he's played all right. He's played better. And last night was probably the best game he's played as a Bear, in my opinion. First time watching it anyways. But, you know, but again, from what it looks like to me, it doesn't look like he's taken reps from Dexter. It looks more like he's taken reps from Pickens. And I could be wrong about that, but there were several instances last night that I thought I saw on the field that it was both Dexter and Justin Jones in there. And I think at least one of those times they were both lined up at 3-tech. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I saw that once. So, you know, to answer your question, do they lose anything having him out there? Well, yeah, number one, they're losing experience. You can say what that means or not. You can debate that, but are they losing anything at this point? I don't really think that's the right question to ask. The right question to ask is you got to see whether or not what you got out of your guy, because Justin Jones' contract is expiring. So you got to get Pickens and Dexter in there anyways because they're young, and you have to figure out if you're going to have to draft a guy or sign a guy or if these guys can be your dominant 3-tech. And to me, Dexter is starting to flash some things that show maybe. And you don't know until you get them on the field more. 25 snaps to me is not enough, and I'm pretty sure that's what the number was.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at is I feel like you have to give those guys more opportunities. And to me, I don't think you're losing much. You are losing experience when Justin Jones isn't out there, but you're also missing a guy tripping and falling over himself half the time on a pass rush situation. Well, occasionally he'll have that big run stop, but I just don't see enough out of him to warrant not giving these rookies some playing time to see what they are. To me, it's for Matt Eberflus, knowing that there is the possibility that you could lose your job this year. Why would you not try to give those rookies the opportunity to develop and say, hey, look, these were my guys. We brought them in this system, and look at how they're growing. And this is my 3 technique, or this is my 1 technique for the future. Like, these guys are what we projected that they could become. And I don't honestly see now, if you have, like you said, if you have Gervon Dexter out there with Justin Jones, okay. But I think a lot of the times we're seeing Justin Jones with Billings out there and not the 2 rookies at all. And to me, I would think put a rookie with a veteran and let them develop that way. But I think we've seen it more the other way during the season. Of course, they're going to rotate a little differently here and there. I was going to
say, they mix it up. They definitely mix it up.
They do mix it up, but I do feel like the majority of the time it's the veterans out there and the rookies out there. But that could be me. I could be wrong there. I don't have any. That's not a calculated answer. I haven't actually counted on film how many times they were paired together and whatnot. But just from the eye test, from what I'm remembering from the games, it seems more veteran, rookie. But either way, I would like to see Pickens get more snaps too, because I'm sorry, if he really did only get 12, I know it was less than 20. That's inexcusable. Get the guy some reps, get him some opportunity, because he played pretty well in his opportunities last night.
I did see him make the 1 tackle for loss, I believe. And he did, I believe he did have 12 snaps. I believe he was had the least amount of snaps on the defensive interior. And to be fair, like I said, I mean, the defensive line played pretty well last night. They had 3 sacks. I mean, that was, again, they were playing the Panthers. So, I mean, I don't know how much you can say about that, but, still, though, I agree. You got to get those guys in there more. You got to see what they've got. Justin Jones on an expiring contract, but Billings, they just extended him. So he's going to get his snap share, especially on rundowns, which we know that already, but he's been getting pretty good push on pass downs too in the past. So, I don't want to get too much into it, but I do want to talk about Montez Sweat's impact later, but I believe we have a guest coming on the show. Why don't you go ahead and introduce Tim?
Yep. It's about time to bring her in. Tonight's guest is from the Shecago Bears podcast. It's her own podcast on YouTube. Her name's Alexis Jade. And if you have not listened, you ought to get on her podcast and listen. She has really great insight on there. and I'm super excited to have her in as a guest on our podcast. Please welcome Alexis. Hey, how are you doing, Alexis?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. I'm always glad to talk Bears.
Right, me too. The good insight part might be a little nice depending on who you ask. Some people might say it's terrible insight. So
Well, we both have the same stance on Justin Fields,
right.
so it's good to me. But
exactly.
So
I feel like you
speaking
can
of,
say the insight thing about anybody, though. So anybody could
No,
look
true.
at you and say, "Oh, your insight's terrible." That's going to be anybody's
Right.
going to have that issue.
So I want to ask you the first question, Alexis. So where are you on our quarterback situation, and do you want to see Justin remain the starter, not just for the rest of the season, but into the future as well?
I'm kind of in the, I mean, I think if you follow my Twitter, you know, I'm a pretty big like Justin Fields advocate, but I'm very much riding just the let's see what happens these next 7 games now left. I think being a Bears fan for so long, my brain is telling me I think I know what's going to happen, and that's the Bears pick a quarterback, depending on our draft position. But I still think Justin Fields, when you look at everything he's done, which I know some people will argue is not a lot, but when you really look at his stats over the last 17 games, 27 games, whatever you look at, you've seen continued growth, and we've seen flashes of really good quarterback play. So I think at the very least, he's a mid-tier quarterback, which in my opinion, if you can develop that with his upside into moving past the mid-tier, I'm still bullish on Justin Fields, but I'm just kind of like, let's see how these next stretch of games go, which it's going to be interesting because it's not easy opponents these next few games either. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like our chances against Detroit.
No.
I don't really know if I like our chances against Minnesota even. I mean, if you get a semblance of what Josh Dobbs did last week, we're in trouble. So,
Right.
yeah, it's a tough stretch. Realistically, if you're asking me, I'm looking at 1-3 over the next 4 games. That's just my realistic guess. But yeah,
Yeah, me
so,
too. I mean, I don't think it's maybe 2 wins max is the best outcome, but yeah, the opponents we face these next like 4 games is not great.
It's not. So assuming they don't draft the quarterback, now everything that I know of, and just like you said, everything I know of the Bears, it's kind of leaning that way. But I'm hoping Ryan Poles isn't like what we've done in the past. I'm hoping he stays away from that because we've seen how that story goes.
Sure.
So assuming they don't draft one, what direction do you think they're going to go? Do you think they're looking to draft for the trenches or skill players or like a mix of both? Because you got the 2 first rounders this year. What direction do you think they're going to go?
I think it's interesting. If we don't draft a quarterback, I would have to assume, if we're guessing, right? So if we're guessing we get the number 1 pick, then I would assume we would trade that one back and for draft capital for whether it's later in the first, some seconds, I don't know. But then depending where our next pick ends up, I think will be interesting because if we can get the top wide receiver, we're going to get him. But if he's not available anymore, if we're pick number 5 and he's gone, knowing Ryan Poles, how we do so far, I would guess if there's no one top talent left that he really, really wants to spend that pick on, I could see him also trading that back for, you know, even if it's just like he did last year, like a few more spots down or 1 spot back. So yeah, I think if we don't get a quarterback, I think Ryan Poles tries to get as much draft capital as he can to really build the trenches, hopefully. But if there's like a stud wide receiver at the top, then, or edge, which I don't think there is like a stud edge in this draft, but then I think he takes him. Otherwise, I think it's just trade back.
Yeah, I can definitely see it going to that direction. But yeah, it's so hard to tell because I feel like every time I know what Ryan Poles is going to do, he does something else. So yeah, I really don't know what's going to happen with that. But
that's how I feel about the quarterback situation too, even because I mean, Ryan Poles traded back last year and didn't pass on Justin Fields. Didn't trade away Justin Fields. He had the option to, and he didn't. So some people argue there's no way he passes the opportunity again if he gets the first. But I'm like, I don't know. Like, he had the chance to get rid of Fields and he didn't. So if Fields does enough to prove it, like, will Poles move on? I don't know. It's really hard to say.
I'm going to read what Torian just posted on here. I believe Poles will reset the QB clock, but they'll allow Getsy to develop the next QB. I hope God
not.
you're wrong, Torian.
Well,
I hope that you are wrong, but
that kind of brings me to a question that I want to ask Alexis here too, because I personally don't think that will be the case with Getsy. The Eberflus being back next year, that one I'm not 100% sold whether he's going to be back or not. I think that one is much more of a possibility. So I want to ask you, Alexis, assuming they do bring him back, assuming they do bring Eberflus back and they decide, let's roll with the head coach. We like the precedent he's established, regardless of the fact he hasn't won a ton of games. We like what he's starting to do around here, but they're going to have to get rid of some of these other coaches. What coaches do you think actually stick around outside of Flus? Because I imagine Getsy would be the first head to fall there.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we don't have a defensive coordinator anymore because Flus is him. So, I mean, that position is interesting. I assume we'd hire if Flus stayed, but like, part of me would say Getsy would be the first one out, but at the same time, if they're keeping Flus, I have to kind of think that they're also keeping Getsy, because if Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren can't see the issues outside of the players, and they really think Matt Eberflus is the head coach going forward and should be the head coach going forward, then I have very little faith that they also think Flus was the problem on why Getsy was the problem on why the offense wasn't working. You know what I mean? I kind of think they go hand in hand. If they keep Flus, then they keep Getsy, because then they're not really seeing the big picture and they don't see the flaws in how the team was coached. They see the problem in solely the player execution.
well,
Yeah. I was going to say, go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say, like, I get where you're coming from. If they decide to keep Flus, it shows a confidence from Poles, but maybe he could say, now look, I like what you're doing and I have confidence and faith that you can right the ship, but your offensive coordinator's got to go, because we have a generational talent at the quarterback position that we can very well develop. We need the right guy here to do that. You wanted to bring in somebody that ran the Shanahan offense, but he's not the guy to develop your quarterback. So you need to bring somebody else in. Say he does that. Do you think Flus would be open to bringing somebody in, or is he going to say, hey, this is my guy?
Well, I guess when you put it like that, like, I can definitely see that. I think the thing that's the big question mark is, like, is Justin Fields the big talented quarterback that's here? Because on one hand, I could see them keeping the staff because they don't want to go through another change. If they're keeping Fields, they'll keep the same head coach, the same OC. But on the other hand, if Poles and Kevin Warren are like, no, we have Fields as the quarterback, but these coaches got to go, like, they're not working. Or in your situation, they like Flus, but the OC's got to go. I could kind of see them doing that, but where it really doesn't work is if we draft a new quarterback and get rid of, or we keep the OC, or I don't know. I feel like it's all one big monopoly. Like, there's so many different scenarios that can play out. And I don't think either one is really good besides just completely cleaning house. But like I said, I support Fields. So I still think Fields has the potential, depending how the rest of the season goes, to be the quarterback in 2024 if he performs well enough. That I'm kind of scared if something like that happened. On one hand, I want Fields to have a new OC. On the other hand, that's another new scheme he has to learn in his fourth year, really third if you don't count rookie mess of a season.
Yeah. And, and personally, I think there are some coaches on the staff that have done a good job. And if they do hang on to Flus, I do think Getsy is for sure the first to go and it's not even just because if they decide to hang on to Justin, if they do bring in a new quarterback, they're going to want somebody to mold this quarterback, not the guy they've seen who continues to fit square pegs into round holes. They don't want that. They're going to want someone who's going to mold their offense around a new kid to come in and have success with him and make him perform to the best of his abilities, which, so to me, I think there are some coaches on the staff. Chris Morgan, the offensive line coach, is one who is pretty good that I think could stick around. Morganzi, the linebackers coach, if Flus stays, I imagine he would be back. And some of the other guys like that. But for the most part, I feel like most of the coaches under Flus, especially on the offensive side, would be gone.
What about Janoco? Do you think he would be gone too?
Yes.
I would hope.
Me personally, I feel like if they get rid of Getsy, Janoco's gone too.
I think he's like anybody that has to do with the passing offense, with the exception of maybe like Tyke Tolbert, who's actually done a really good job at the wide receiver.
I think Tolbert would be gone too.
You think so?
I think
he is the passing coordinator.
What have the receivers done outside of like Mooney this season? Most of them have regressed. Look at the Claypool saga that we just dealt with. That was a nightmare.
True.
These things are all, you have to take accountability with these coaches that are putting this stuff on the field. Now, to be fair, there are some things that the receivers have done that are pretty good, but for the most part, look what they've done. Pretty much nothing outside of DJ Moore, which is why we have DJ Moore now.
Right.
Mooney has literally regressed in this offense, which makes absolutely no sense to me because he was Fields' favorite target in Nagy's system.
What's the routes they're running? Look at the routes that they're all going on, and half the time they're going to the same spot.
That makes no sense.
It doesn't. It's wild to me. But Jeff, why don't you go ahead and take a question? I'm gonna stop talking for a minute.
Well, that's the one question that was the one question I wanted to ask about that. But I actually want to ask you another question, Alexis, that's not exactly Bears related, but it is related to the game last night. There was quite a long interview last night that they put on with Jason Kelce on the screen. And for one, I want to get your thoughts on that. And for two, I also want to get your thoughts on the broadcast crew, because for the longest time, in my personal opinion, Al Michaels has been one of the better play-by-play guys in football and really in some other sports too. But as of late, he just seems, number one, disinterested, and number two, unprepared. And I feel like really the same thing for Herbstreit. So I kind of want to get your thoughts on those things.
I would agree with that. I would also, with, saying they look uninterested, unprepared, I would agree, but I also feel like, to be fair, I do watch other games, but when I'm watching, I'm kind of just like, I'm working on editing, or like if I'm watching a Bills game, I kind of live tweet, I kind of work on a podcast, I'm like multitasking. So I'm really only listening when it's the Bears game. And when it's the Bears, to be honest, I feel like the games they've had to commentate on have sucked. So I don't really blame them for being disinterested. I think the whole Jason Kelce thing was, it was interesting. I thought when it first happened, I tweeted oh, this has been the best part of the game. I didn't know it would go on for another 30 minutes after that. But honestly, okay, here's my true take on it. My genuine take is I kind of think they purposely did that because, one, they knew the game was going to suck. And it was a primetime game and it wasn't flexed. So they were like, we need to find a way to get people to actually want to watch this. And who's more popular in football than the Kelce brothers? And two, I kind of think with him always being on the fence of retirement, I kind of think this is a mini audition for him. I think seeing how he could talk, 100%. And he even interrupted them to be like, oh, they're doing they're snapping the ball or whatever he was doing. And so, he was definitely watching the game and he was commentating on it and answering their questions where they were more interested in his Sexiest Man Alive cover. He was actually talking about the game. So it kind of gave me the vibes that was almost supposed to be, without it actually being one, a mini audition for him for future casting and stuff.
Yeah, I kind of always felt like whenever they first started the prime Thursday night games, that Herbstreit was kind of like a temporary option anyway. And bringing in Al Michaels was for an allure thing to maybe bring in somebody in the future that would maybe be on the fence otherwise because Al Michaels has that pedigree. Well, hey, Al Michaels is the Thursday night guy. Like, this is a really good job. Maybe I'd be interested in taking this.
Right.
And so, for me, Herb Street, like, he's a college guy, and yes, I think he does his homework and he does a good job, but I don't think he ever wanted to do it permanently. I think this is more of a like, hey, they offered me this, and I probably said, hey, I'll do it temporarily until you guys can find somebody, because I've got a lot of stuff going on already. But I feel like that was an option for them just long enough to find somebody. And I think you're probably right 100% on that. Like Kelsey, it was like an audition.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll ask you one last thing before we let you go here in a little bit, but I wanted to talk to you about your new YouTube series that you're getting ready to start.
Yeah.
So if you haven't followed Alexis yet, follow her at Alexis Jade on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And follow her on YouTube on the Shecago Bears Network. That's SHECAGO. And you'll find some really good content there. But she has a new series that she just told me about today. And I'm going to let her divulge into that a little bit and explain what that's all about.
Yeah, it's kind of anticlimactic because it was actually supposed to premiere today, and I had technical difficulties. Long story short, I'm after this going to Best Buy to pick up my new laptop, so that's where we're at with that. But it is not Chicago Bears related, so that is the disappointment. If you're looking for something that's another like Bears content, it's not Bears related, but it is football related, and it is on my YouTube channel that's just under Alexis Jade. Both the channels are linked, so you can find both of them through each other, however YouTube does that. But it is a quarterback series, YouTube series, and I think maybe I'll leave it at that so that there's still some mystery when I go to actually, release the series. But yeah, it's going to be, if you're interested in football and maybe you're not a Bears fan, or you're just tired of watching the Bears if the season ends and there's nothing to talk about, then you can find other football content related things on that channel that I've been working on the past few months.
So quarterbacks, are you like watching film and explaining the film, or is it like a documentary series? Without giving away too much, which direction are we going here?
It's essentially kind of like everything you listed. It's watching film. It's drills. It's workouts. It's in the future collaborations as well. So yeah, it's kind of almost like deep diving into the life of a quarterback. But obviously, I'm not, Justin Fields or Aaron Rodgers, so you have to deal with me. But that's, I guess, the gist of the series.
So before we let you go, I want to ask you one more question. So say Matt Eberflus stays and they do fire Luke Getsy, who would you like to see run the offense? Or if they fired Matt Eberflus, who would you like to see them hire as head coach?
Ooh, okay. That one's hard because for a while now, I haven't done deep research into him yet, but I really like Ben Johnson from the Lions offensive coordinator. I don't know if he's looking to move teams after this. That I haven't looked into any of that, but
he should. He could
I've
probably
liked him. Right. And on one hand, I'm like, I don't know if he'd want another OC job. So I would be like, put him as OC. So I guess I would say him as head coach in a dream world, but at the same time, then the question becomes, who do you put it as offensive coordinator? And I really don't know, because I'm trying to look at, if we're keeping Fields, right? If we'll just go with that scenario right now, you have to look, and even if we're not, if we draft someone like Caleb Williams, they're the same type of player. I mean, they're both, play action, that type of is their kind of their niche, right? So I don't know who, because we thought Getsy was the person who could run a similar Shanahan style offense and be the perfect coordinator to use Fields to his strengths, and we've seen how that turned out. So I'm really kind of hesitant to say anyone yet because I don't trust anyone, and I haven't looked to see who the next like Shanahan tree offensive coordinator to be is. I mean, like, do you guys have any offensive coordinators? Because I genuinely don't. I've been trying to search the Shanahan tree because that's more Field style, but I don't know. I haven't really seen anyone that like jumps out at me for OC.
If I had to pick, I would probably narrow it down to two. My top choice would be Pep Hamilton. And the reason I say Pep is because he's had success with several quarterbacks. He has been known, and Greg will mention this on Greg Talks Football, but he does tend to adjust to his players and quarterback strengths. And I've just seen enough from him from a quarterback standpoint that, I mean, you're not going to hire him in as a quarterback's coach. He's probably going to want to be an OC. He had already.
He's going to be the assistant head coach OC if they bring him in. Would be my guess.
So I personally like Pep, and I am kind of starting to lean towards Greg Roman, even though I told myself I never would. He's another one that really. He got Colin Kaepernick to the NFC Championship game 3 times.
That's true.
It's hard to say. Now, was it all him or Harbaugh? Who knows? But I think that's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, I was going to say
Herbert, a lot of why I like Pep, though. Yes, MC Fact just put that on there. Justin Herbert, what he did with him his rookie year was special.
Yep.
One thing I want to add, and there is a question that came in the comments earlier that I want to ask you right before you go too, Alexis. But one thing I want to add to all that too, guys, is I think if they do move on from Getsy, which they likely will, and if they do hang on to Flus, he's going to bring in an offensive coordinator who's done it before. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's my personal opinion, especially if they hang on to Fields, because they're going to want somebody who's come in, who's done this stuff before, who's molded quarterbacks before and had success. And I really do think Pep Hamilton would be right at the top of that list if they were looking to do something like that, especially if they, like I said, if they hung on to Fields. Now, if they go a different direction at quarterback, I think a guy like Ben Johnson could very well be in consideration for a head coaching job, but not as a coordinator. He's going to go take a head coaching job somewhere. But
that's a very good point, actually, because that's one of my hesitancies with Ben Johnson is we just experienced Fields, even though we were so optimistic. It was a brand new, someone who's never been a head coach before, someone who's never been an OC before. And I mean, we should have kind of been able to see the red flags there from the beginning. But yeah, I think especially like you said, if we retain Fields, then you have to get someone who's done the job before, because we can't do someone learning with Fields in his 4th year.
I mean, it's like every other head coach. It's been experience or inexperience. Lovie Smith, Mark Trestman, John Fox, Matt Nagy, Matt Eberflus. Like, it's almost like you have experience, and then I want somebody who doesn't have head coaching experience. And it's like, which one's going to work this time? And it's like a revolving carousel. Yeah, but Jeff, go ahead. You had a question you wanted to ask real quick, or did you already just ask it?
Yeah, there's a question from a commenter. We'll just ask real quick before you go here. Cliff wants to know, Alexis, what's your score prediction against Detroit?
Oh gosh, I haven't thought about it yet because I haven't filmed my my podcast yet because of all my technical difficulties today and the other day. But like, part of me is like, we're gonna get blown out. It's gonna be terrible if we play anything like we did against the Panthers, at least on offense. But Justin Fields is supposed to be back. Fingers crossed. Even though Flus had a really weird presser today, but we won't dive into that. But okay, I'll make it quick. Let's go 27-20 Lions.
It's pretty close. Pretty close. But I think the way the defense is playing, that's probably fair.
Defense is playing pretty well.
Right. I was almost going to go 17, but I was like, if Fields is playing, I think he at least gets 20 on the board. That's my hope, at least.
Hope so too. Well, thanks, Alexis, for joining us. Really good stuff tonight. really good. I like the content here, like good answers, some tough questions to answer, and you did a great job with those. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
We'll have you on again sometime.
Sounds good. Have a good rest of the show.
You too. Thank you.
So there's a comment in here, Tim. I want to jump on real quick because
Jordan's
talking
comment on there. Is that the one you're looking at? Jordan's comment?
Yeah. So let me jump on this real quick. So Jordan makes a comment on here. I'd respectfully push back and ask someone to expound on what their hesitation with Ben Johnson is with respect to his scheme. And for one, me personally, Jordan, I have no issues with Ben Johnson. I like Ben Johnson a lot. If they were to move on and hire a new head coach and they hired Ben Johnson, you would hear no qualms from me whatsoever. I feel like the job he has done over there in Detroit is nothing short of remarkable. I feel like what he has done with Jared Goff, turning him from a below replacement level player into a above average starter is, again, nothing short of remarkable. So I tend to agree with you, Jordan. I would be on board with Ben Johnson. But again, that if they keep Flus, there's no way that happens because he's not going to take a lateral move as an offensive coordinator. But if they do fire Flus, and they bring in Ben Johnson, again, I would not have any qualms with that.
I would just like to rebuttal by saying, as far as offensively and play calling, you would also hear zero qualms from me. I would love to have Ben Johnson. My only hesitation would be his staff, because a lot of times when you bring in a first-time head coach, they don't have the connections, and he's young, so they may not have all the connections to have a lot of good coordinators. And it's not just coordinators. You've got to have your running backs coaches, wide receiver coaches, offensive line coaches, defensive coaches. Like, you're asking for a lot of guys, and they don't always have the connections. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they and him being in Detroit is a big positive there because they have had success there and they have good guys in that building. And Dan Campbell is very, very well respected in the NFL. And I think Ben Johnson is now to that point too, because of what he's been able to do. And I think there will be coaches that want to coach with him. And before I say anything else, I don't think I would have any qualms with Ben Johnson in particular. I'm just speaking from a first-time head coach and how they would build a staff, not necessarily Ben Johnson.
Well, I would imagine for one, he's going to be well respected by other coaches around the league, specifically for what he's done. Number one, and number two, again, he's had so much success over there in Detroit that I'm sure he's going to have some of those coaches there with him also that would follow him. And what he has done there is something that, and this is what I like the most about it. He shows a lot of creativity with that offense, but also this is the part that bothers me with Nagy, and it bothers me with Getsy as well. They're always trying to overthink things and get too cute. Sometimes you can run a meat and potatoes and just be fine with it. Pound the ball. Don't be too smart. There were instances last night in that last drive where I'm thinking to myself, bring in Mercedes Lewis, line him up next to Wright, go Jenkins, Wright, Lewis, and just pound the ball behind him in the last drive, pick up the first down, and seal the game. But instead, they're running left twice, and then they're throwing a slant route on third down that scared the living piss out of me. So my issue is if you can just find a way to get some balance there, because again, there are some things, I've told you this before, there's some things that Getsy does that you do like. There's some concepts that he develops that you look and you're like, oh, I kind of like that. But most of the time you're thinking to yourself, what are we doing right now? Why are we trying to get so cute? Why are we overthinking these things? It's, we need a yard and we're running out of the shotgun. I don't get this stuff sometimes, So to me, again, Ben Johnson would be fine with me if he's going to bring his offense as a head. He'd have to be a head coach, but I would not mind that. No, I'd be on board with it.
I would too. And the reason I didn't mention his name when I asked Alexis that question is because, like you said, Ben Johnson's not coming in here to be an offensive coordinator. He's coming in to be a head coach. He's already an OC. He'd be looking for a promotion. He's not just going to go from Detroit, where he's had a ton of success, to come here to a team that's not had any semblance of success. unless he really felt like, hey, I want to come in here and turn this whole thing around. But it's so unlikely. He'd be coming in to be a head coach for sure. And I don't know if I would have a better head coach candidate. Can we please just squash the Jim Harbaugh conversation once and for all? He's not coming on to coach the Chicago Bears. I don't think the McCaskies like him at all.
I think that's the thing you got to look at. Here's the main thing is he a pretty good football coach? Does wherever he goes, does he have programs that have been pretty bad and end up with success with them? Sure. Yeah, he's a pretty good football coach. But at the end of the day, we got to consider all those things. We got to consider, number one, the McCaskies are in charge. And I would tend to doubt that they like Harbaugh, especially with the chatter that goes on around him behind closed doors, the things that he's supposedly doing where he's not exactly the most, what's the word I'm looking for? He's not the most innocent person in the world per se from what has been said about him. And I don't think that's going to, the McCaskies don't like that kind of thing. I don't feel like, so I just don't think that would be an option for the Bears. And I don't know that would be the best option anyways, even if it was. So personally, I would not want Harbaugh. I don't think it's going to happen anyways. But yeah, I mean, you can't argue with the fact that he does have success where he goes for the most part. Sure.
I want to look. There was a comment that was on here about, I think it was MC Fact. He was talking about Jim Caldwell should have been hired over Matt Eberflus. And I got to tell you, of the final three that the hiring committee had narrowed it down to, which was Matt Eberflus, Jim Caldwell, and from Dallas, head coach from Atlanta, Dan Quinn. Of those three, I would have taken Caldwell or, gosh, I just forgot his name again, and I just said it. Quinn. I would have taken either one of them over Matt Eberflus. And my reason is because of what I just said a minute ago, the ability to build a staff. What Dan Quinn was able to do in Atlanta with Kyle Shanahan and all of his other coaches that he had with him, several have gone on to have ridiculous success in the NFL. Matt LaFleur was his quarterback's coach. The man showed he knows how to build a staff. So that would have been enough for me to hire Dan Quinn because he can build a staff and have really great guys in the building. And Jim Caldwell has a wealth of experience in the NFL. Another guy who probably would have been able to bring in a great staff with him. And these guys have been around for so long now that they know what guys are worthy of bringing in and what guys are, probably not good coordinator candidates off the bat. If you would have asked me before Luke Getsy was hired, if I ever thought his name would come up in a coordinator job, I would have never said yes to that. I would have had no idea because I barely had even heard of him up until that point.
I had never heard of him.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't a name. He wasn't really a name I thought of. And honestly, who's thinking of Aaron Rodgers quarterback coach at this point in his career? Unless you're talking about like his first quarterback coach in Green Bay, maybe. But now, when he's already had the career that he's had, not what I was thinking of at all.
Well, here's what bothers me about the whole situation. And Alexis makes a good point here. I can't believe we never even interviewed Mike McDaniel. Imagine him with Fields. I 100% agree with that wholeheartedly. And Torian makes a point also that they interviewed Doug Peterson. He was even at Bears camp. Both these things happen. The part that bothers me about this whole thing, even with both of those things considered, the biggest mistake to me in the Ryan Poles era, there's two of them. Number one is Chase Claypool. That's the biggest one first and foremost. It's obvious because he traded a premium draft pick and got peanuts back for it. That's the number one biggest miss. But the number two biggest miss so far has been what he did with the head coach hire. And the part that bothers me most about it is not so much that he hired Eberflus, which we can go on and on about that, but it's the fact that he made this knee-jerk reaction after meeting him one freaking time and not interviewing anybody else and just said, oh, that's my guy. I know it already in my heart. I just know it. He's my guy. He didn't even try to talk to anybody else after that. He talked to Dan Quinn that day. That was it. And he was like, oh, no, I'm pretty sure Eberflus is my guy already. That's the one thing that Poles did right off the bat that bothers me. And I really still can't get over it because it's like, look what we're dealing with here. And if he would have just sat back and really thought it out and made the decision after interviewing other people and really taking his time with it, I don't know for sure he would have actually I don't know he would have hired Eberflus is my point.
Well, and that's what leads me to think that if you want to call it conspiracy, the rumblings about how the McCaskies and the hiring committee said, hey, we'll hire you, but you got to pick from one of these three guys. That's kind of where I think that is what happened, because I mean, he gets hired in, and the very next day he hires Eberflus after only interviewing him and Dan Quinn. And Dan Quinn was kind of like he walked in and walked out kind of thing. Like, it was, I think he knew he wasn't getting hired. And to me, it's like, I feel like they said, hey, you got to hire one of these three. And maybe he wasn't sold on them, or maybe they said, hey, you got to hire Matt Eberflus. But to me, I don't know that he ever got the opportunity. He said he was given the opportunity to choose who he wanted, but I think he'd already liked Matt Eberflus before. But you can't tell me that he had a well thought out execution of his coaching hire when he didn't even hire anybody from the outside. He literally only interviewed the guys that they had narrowed it down to. And there were a ton of good candidates still out there left that he didn't even interview.
We're running out of time here, so I want to get a couple things off real quick. There's two comments here. You guys are putting up some great comments tonight, by the way. There's two comments here. One from Torian I want to put up first. He says, he kind of expounds on what we were talking about exactly about polls. And then he stripped the roster in a critical development year for Fields, which I do agree with that. He stripped the roster down, and now to this day, we're all talking about, well, I don't think Fields is the guy. He hasn't made enough progress. And yeah, all those things are true. Fields definitely has some blame to put forth for his performance, but it's like, what have we done to help this kid for 2 years now? We put nothing around him. His offensive line was terrible last year. The defense was awful. They couldn't get off the field. And when that's the case, your offense can't get going anyways. So really, they haven't done him any favors there. So I do agree with that point, Torian. So it's like, to me, that's also a reason why maybe they're not just going to move on from him. Maybe they're just going to continue to give him chances to see what he can do. Because now if they start to get the rest of the team going like they have, the offensive line plays better, the defense plays better, and Fields still doesn't look very good. If he still is regressing and not playing well like he did in a couple of the games this year, the first 3 games, then yeah, I mean, he doesn't have any excuses at that point. But to go back to another commenter that was on here, Jordan said also, to play devil's advocate, it is not in the realm of possibility that Justin Fields wasn't as desirable guy to the coaches everyone pines over, like Mike McDaniel, Dable, Kyle Shanahan. I would just say this, Jordan. Dable, I can't speak to, but I would say that it was probably already a done deal. He was going to New York because of Joe Shane. I don't think he was ever going to come to Chicago regardless of any other situation. That was probably a done deal. McDaniel, in that game last year, the way he was glossing over Fields, both during and after the game, I would be shocked if he didn't want to coach Justin Fields. So the fact that they didn't bring him in and at least interview Mike McDaniel does bother me, because I would be shocked if he didn't want to coach Justin Fields. He was glossing over him the whole game last year. And afterwards,
before you continue on with that, Bill Polian is the one that led that hiring committee. He literally went after Colts guys. That's the only reason I think he looked at Matt Eberflus and guys who have been in the league for a long time. I don't think he was trying to find these newer, innovative coaches. I don't even know if Mike McDaniel was even approached for an interview. I highly doubt it.
Yeah, and I agree. It's like, and here's the thing: is like, there's a lot of debate about Fields right now, whether people are in or out. And some people are going to say, I don't understand how you could still be in, how you could still want to give this kid time and all that. But again, the team is starting to turn a corner. Things are a little bit different now. At the end of the day, you're going to give him these last 7 games regardless, and there is a chance that they give him next year too, because they have still control on him. But that doesn't – I mean, I think if he doesn't show a lot of improvement, like a significant amount of improvement, they are going to draft a quarterback in the draft next year. Now, where they draft that quarterback in the draft remains to be seen. If they take him at the top of the draft, it's because they did not see anywhere near enough from Fields and they're ready to move on. If they take a guy in like maybe the 3rd round or so, it's like, well, we saw some progress, but we don't know for sure. And we're going to take a guy that's got some upside that we believe in, that we can progress. And let's give Justin the year to see if he can do it. And if not, we're going to throw this 3rd round guy in and see if he's our guy. I could see that happening. I very well could see that happening.
Before we get out of here, I just want to say, as a Bears fan, what we should be looking for, and I've heard this from a lot of people, and I 100% agree, what we should be looking for is Justin to finish out the year strong, have a good end of the season, know that he's the guy, because then you can allocate those resources in the draft to our other areas of need, because there's going to be several. And it's from offensive line to defensive line to possibly another defensive back, because I'm not sure Eddie Jackson's going to be able to go much longer. He's probably going to be a cap casualty and get cut. There's all kinds of positions on this team that need filled. And if you can avoid using it on a quarterback, why wouldn't you? So the goal should be for Justin, or maybe even Tyson, which that's another debate for another day. But it should be for Justin to have a great end of the season and show that he's the guy.
Well, we're going to be talking about this for the next 7 weeks, so I don't want to spend a whole bunch more time on it. But I will say, because of the fact we're running out of time, I want to get one more thing off my chest, at least, before we get out of here. It's starting to get dark on my end anyways. I need to turn a light on in here. But I want to say one more thing and it's about Montez Sweat, because I don't think we can – the impact that this dude is having already, after walking in the door 2 weeks ago, he probably doesn't even know the defense yet at this point. I'm sure he doesn't know the defense entirely yet at this point. The impact he comes in, he had at least 5 pressures last night, and most of the statisticians out there will tell you he had 8. He was all over the field last night, looking like an absolute menace. He's making the guys around him better. He's already showing return of investment that you're looking for in this guy. So right there, I mean, again, and I talked about this last week too, they were trying to get out in front of free agency in the draft, because at the end of the day, it's like Poles is doing the same thing he did last year with Claypool. He's looking at the market and he's saying, man, there's not a whole lot out there for us to look at. I mean, look at the top of the draft this year. Edge rusher is pretty thin. There's nothing at the top. So what he's saying is, I got to get someone now. I got to supplement this line now, or I'm not going to have a chance next year. So he got out there, he made a trade, he got his guy, and he locked him up. I love the move, and I think it's paying dividends right now.
Yeah, to me, giving up a second-round pick was not all that much. And honestly, his deal was right at market value. And if he would have been on the open market, I can promise you he would not have signed with the Bears for market value. It would have been a much, much bigger deal for the Bears to sign him. And he probably wasn't signing here anyway if you would have tried to sign him as a free agent. Whoever would have traded for him was locking him up. It was a done deal. So he
would have had a deal with Atlanta if he didn't come to Chicago, and they would have probably locked him up too, especially because he's from that area. And he might even gotten a hometown discount there for all we know. So right. The fact that the Bears went out and made this happen, and again, other people have talked about this too. In 2 years, hell, not even in 2 years, by the end of this offseason, when other edge rushers get locked up, his deal's going to look like a deal. It's going to look like a really nice deal, because at the end of the day, there's going to be other pass rushers that surpass that and reset the market. Wait till Parsons gets paid. Oh my goodness. When he gets paid, he's probably going to make $40 million. He's going to reset the whole market.
Easily. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, we got to get out of here, Jeff, but
well, let's see if anybody's got any questions before we jump out real quick. If anybody's got any questions that they want to ask us before we get out of here, let's get them in the chat and we'll get off on a high note. I thought I saw some questions earlier in the show, but I could be wrong. I thought Cliff had a question right at the top. Here we go. If Flus loses to Carolina, does he get fired? And this is a hypothetical in as far as from last night. Well, in my opinion, no. And the reason I say no is for the same reason that it's always been no, because ownership just doesn't do that. They just don't fire head coaches in season. It's just not what they do. And I don't know if it's because of the fact they don't want to walk away from the money they're paying someone in season to not do their job, which, I mean, they're going to walk away from dead money anyway, so I doubt it's that. I don't know if it's because they want to give the guy a chance to finish out the season, or if they just always wait. I don't know what it is, if it's some kind of protocol, but at the end of the day, I just don't think it would happen simply because of that reason, that they just don't.
The McCaskies don't like paying head coaches that are not in the building. That's what it comes down to. And he's probably got at minimum a 3 or 4 year contract, probably a 4-year contract. They don't pay guys that aren't in the building. It's rare. And they've never fired somebody in the middle of a season in the 100 years they've been around. It's not going to happen now. They're going to let him finish out the year and go from there. Because for one, who are you going to bring in house that can be your head coach? You don't have anybody. So you're not going to bring somebody from the outside. You have to relearn everything. You'd have to have either a brand new defense or brand new offense or one of the other, probably defense because you'd be firing Eberflus. But everything would have to change. It's not going to happen, and that's the biggest reason.
I was going to say there's a question here from Kevin, and I'm going to go turn a light on real quick. So why don't you start answering this question first, Tim, and then I'll give my point on this or my take on it.
So I think he's asking
defensive tackle from Kevin.
Right. I would say if you're asking defensive tackle, are you talking about the 3 technique or the 1 technique? If you're talking 3 technique,
he's obviously talking 3 technique because that's the focal point of the defense.
To me, right now, I'm not sure. I don't have the answer to that. I will say that if Gervon Dexter continues to improve, and if he's on this trajectory he is right now, and he just continues getting better, it's going to be him, I think. And that was the whole reason they drafted him, because they saw the traits that developed into a really great 3 technique in this defense, because he does have the ability to get off the ball. Pickens, I think, is more like the 1 technique, but I see him being a rotational piece, at least for the next 3 years, because now that we've signed Billings to an extension, Billings has just been way too good there to take a whole lot of reps from him. He's so good in the run game. But yeah, I would say it's going to be Dexter.
Well, let me just say this. First of all, Kevin, you have a great name for a defensive tackle as Kevin Williams. That's a perfect defensive tackle name. But I will say, as far as the 3 tech and the 1 tech, the future 1 tech, I don't believe is on the roster right now. I believe Billings is their guy for the next couple years. He's the guy they want to be their 1 tech for the next couple years, but I don't feel like they think their 1 tech is on the roster. And I agree with Jordan that they're not. Pickens would be a promising 3 tech if they use him as such, but I feel like they want they want Dexter to be their 3 tech of the future, so they're going to give him more of those reps there and see if Pickens can play the 1. Now, whether I agree with it or not isn't the point, but I just don't think that. I do think he's a rotational piece, Pickens. I think he can, like Tim said, I think he can be a good rotational piece. I at this point, I don't see him being like a starter at any point. But I do think Dexter is the future at 3 tech. At this point, I think he's starting to show some flashes. Now, things could change on that front. He would really have to start showing more production as far as like sacks and whatnot. But I do think he's starting to show that ability at this point. Yes. Great question.
So Mr. Fact is asking a question. When will you guys be back on the air? This has been really good. This has been really good. Well, we really appreciate that. We're on every Friday night at 6 p.m. Central Time. So that you'll see us every week. We won't have a show in 2 weeks because that's Black Friday, but every other Friday at 6 p.m. Central Time, you'll find us on here.
Yeah, every Friday, guys. Same time we'll be here, other than like obvious holidays and stuff. That's the only time we wouldn't be. And if there were any changes to the show or anything, we'd let you guys know. I appreciate Cliff the comment about the Zeppelin shirt. I love this shirt. It's probably my favorite shirt I have, honestly, of all my band shirts.
I want to comment on that. Because
I probably got 4 Zeppelin shirts.
Nobody's noticing my Blink 182 shirt. Like, come on, guys. Blake just came out with a new album. It was, by the way, it is phenomenal. I was going back and forth with Joe Mandel. He's also works for the Barroom Network, talking about the new Blink 182 album. If you have not listened to it, it is phenomenal. It is a quote unquote, I think he called it a masterpiece. And I totally agree. It is one of my favorite albums of theirs, period. It is so good.
Cliff says Blink. You never heard of Blink 182, Cliff? They're like one of the best bands from the 90s.
Yes.
Big time group from the 90s.
If you don't know who they are, Travis Barker is, I don't know if they're married, but he's with Kourtney Kardashian and they just had a baby. So thank you, Alexis. Yeah, I love Blink 182 too. One of my all-time favorites.
Yeah. There was something else I wanted to say in here. I saw, I wanted to bring up one more thing, guys. From the beginning of the Cliff was too stoned in the 90s. Anyways, guys, so I want to bring up from beginning of the show we talked about Willis's Wallops. I want to remind you guys all again, it's a segment we're going to start doing on the show, hopefully here in the next week or two, where we have like a little clip of big hits around the league, like we talked about, hits, tackles, blocks, pancakes, any kind of big collisions you guys are seeing on the field. send us an email over to right there on the screen, Willis Twin Towers Podcast at gmail.com. Send me an email with a clip of your shot. We'll try to get it on the screen. We'll give you credit for it too. We'll give you credit for sending it in to us. We'll get it on the screen, and we'll have a nice little time with the big hits on the screen there. I think it'll be fun for us all. So again, that's any big hits, tackles, blocks, pancakes, stuff like that. Send it over to us. Willis Twin Towers Podcast at gmail.com. Anything you want to add, Tim, before we get out of here?
Yeah, honestly, I would also say that if you have like a blooper, that would be good too. Like, because one of my favorite things is watching like the Mark Sanchez
whiff block.
Yes, just guys running into each other. As long as it's not from the Bears, because I don't want to see that. I don't want to see the Bears bad plays.
To give you guys some ideas of some good clips, if you guys follow me on Twitter, there's one I'll talk about on there. But a couple weeks ago was one. Tevin Jenkins drove a guy like 5 yards and pancaked him, and a really, really good clip that you guys could use for this kind of thing. If you go on my Twitter at JAW0235, give me a follow. If you get on my Twitter, you'll see one of my recent posts. I reposted the quarterback school, who's also a really good follow, JT O'Sullivan. If you guys don't watch his videos, he does really good breakdowns of quarterbacks. But he posted a clip of Cole Kmet just absolutely blasting a guy into orbit on a freaking chip block this weekend. It was an edge defender too, so it wasn't some little guy. And he just annihilated this guy. It was absolutely awesome. So if you guys are looking for stuff like that, go ahead and follow me on Twitter, JAW0235. You can see that clip on there, and that'll give you a good idea what kind of stuff we're looking for.
It made me laugh because you watch it and you'll see like Cole Kmet react. He's almost like, did that really just happen? I barely touched that guy and he went flying.
Seriously, guys, if you haven't seen it.
Wait a minute, did that happen?
Yeah, if you guys haven't seen it, go check that out, because he just gives him a little toss, and this guy just gets sent into freaking orbit, man. He goes like 3 yards on totally flat. It's awesome. So check it out, guys. Great show tonight. I appreciate everybody's comments here. Everybody's saying how much they loved it. We really appreciate you guys' support. And one thing I want to mention also, Tori, and I'm left-handed too. That's funny you say that. But again, guys, we want to thank you. And thanks again to Aldo, as always. The guy is awesome. Yes. Give him a follow as well at Barroom Network, guys. Aldo's a great guy. He's been through some stuff lately. If you don't know already, if you haven't been following the other shows, but luckily he's doing really well, and we love to see that. Again, great guy. Thanks, Aldo, for this opportunity. We love all you guys and appreciate you being here. And other than that, I'll let you close it out, Tim, but we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Appreciate you guys. Let's go Irish this weekend, and we'll be back at it with the Bears in 2 weeks, 10 days.
Bear down.